Hello, it's me, Beth Rigby from the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, and I wanted to let you know that we are going on tour. We're coming to London, Salford, Liverpool and Glasgow. Ruth Davidson will, of course, be there too.
We're going to have some very special guests, and we're also getting you involved, so come along, ask us any question you like. It is going to be a super fun evening.
For all the info, go to aegpresents.co.uk. We'll be podding in person. Come along. Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction. I've left the studio behind in search of some actual sun, but despite being on holiday, this pod never stops. Now, Ruth, what have you been up to? I've heard that there is a new member of the Davidson-Jen household.
There is. We've got a new puppy. His name is Fergus. He's half Irish setter, half standard poodle. And my other dog, Wilson, has gone from the last couple of days being utterly ambivalent to him to now interacting with him, and they've started playing, and it's super cute.
Aww. Do they cuddle up together at night and stuff? So sweet.
No, because we made a fatal error with Wilson in that we allowed him to sleep on the bed.
Big mistake.
So, yeah, exactly. Enormous mistake. So we are consigning this one to a dog bed on the floor in our room. So we're not having the rod for our back on that one.
God, it's been busy for you then. Hey, well, look, Ruth, in honour of Fergus, I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see this is my new T-shirt. It's got puppies on it and it says love cute.
Haha, love a bit of puppy.
I can't have my own puppy, so I've put it on my T-shirt. And I've got some very happy news because we have Harriet Harman. She is back with us today.
I know, we're it.
I know, I'm so happy about this. Now, Harriet, since we last saw you, you have been put into the Lords, as we were talking about when you came on the pod. You are going to become Baroness Harman of Peckham. How does that feel?
It feels great, but slightly mad. You know, the House of Lords is a very strange institution. And I'll have to be hearing from Ruth about what needs to be changing. I'll have to be sort of modest and listening for a few seconds.
Seconds, I like it. Yeah.
Harriet, I'm reliably informed that you've got a whole file of topics that you want to get through today with us. So we've got a lot to talk about.
I'm still struggling with over-enthusiasm. I was expecting, after the election happened, I would start calming down, but then it's all kicked off in America, and Beyonce and Taylor Swift are doing a fundraiser for Kamala Harris. Did you know that about Beyonce and Taylor Swift?
I did know that, yes.
I mean, I 100% did not know that because I am a stuffy old Tory peer, mother of one. Like, I was not down with what all the pop stars are doing.
Well, I think it's the older women have got George Clooney, luring them to Kamala Harris, and the younger women have all got Beyonce and Taylor Swift.
I mean, George Clooney, Beyonce and Taylor Swift, I would have them on my bench. I think it would be helpful.
You want George Clooney on your bench? Is that what we're calling it these days, Beth?
I wonder what she was going to say.
I'd like him on my bench. Okay, well, look, we are going to be discussing Keir Starmer and his first PMQs. What is it like to be in the hot seat? We're also going to tell you what to expect when the Chancellor announces how much money there is or isn't. That's next week. Rachel Reeves on her spending inheritance. We're going to have some of that today. And we'll reflect on the week a woman entered the US presidential race. It's Kamala Harris. What a week it has been in US politics. So this week, we got to see Prime Minister Keir Starmer, his first ever PMQs. It was a lot calmer, wasn't it, between Starmer and Sunak than what we've got used to. And most of Sunak's questions were about foreign policy. Now, something very special about being with Ruth and Harriet is that you've both actually been there. I've watched it in the press gallery from afar, but you two, Harriet, you've stood at the dispatch box at PMQs as Deputy Prime Minister, and you've been on the other side asking the questions when you were acting leader of the opposition. And Ruth, you've been there asking questions at First Minister's Questions in Holyrood when you were the Scottish Conservative leader. So I've got two people that don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. So, Harriet, let me start with you. How do you prepare for all the questions that get thrown at you? And is it extremely nerve-wracking?
Well, every time I watch Prime Minister's questions, I think, thank God it is not me either putting the questions or least of all answering the questions, because it's a very important thing, because it's accountability. It's like all the departments funnel into the Prime Minister's office. This is what we've been doing. This is what's happening. And he or she has to be front of house, actually telling the Commons and the whole nation, this is what the government's doing. So it's a big constitutional moment of accountability. But it's terrifying because if you're answering the questions, you don't know what the questions are. They could be anything in the whole of the world, and you have these great big folders which are like encyclopedias, and you have to be on top of everything. You can't just say, oh, sorry, I don't know that question, or just do something off the top of your head, although Boris Johnson did a fair amount of that. It's like an exam with no syllabus at all. It's just the whole world. And also the other thing is you've got all your own side banked up behind you, and they want you to do well. You want them to go out of the chamber with a spring in their step and their head held high, and that everybody on the other side wants you to fall flat on your face. So it's very adversarial and terrifying. But I think actually Rishi Sunak did really well because he was magnanimous, acknowledged the position, he asked intelligent questions about Ukraine. You can't just come in as a loser of an election and slag off the winner. It doesn't work. So I think he did it very well and did a little self-deprecating joke.
It's a hard gig for Rishi Sunak, isn't it? I mean, he's lost the election horrifically. He's still like a caretaker leader until they pick someone else. I mean, he can hardly kind of try and lord it over Keir Starmer or be critical really in any which way at the moment, right? It's a bit of a hospital pass, that one for him right now, isn't it?
It was almost impossible, and he was going to have to do areas that weren't really in contest at the election was what he had to do because he was never going to win. I mean, I think Keir Starmer's going to have tougher PMQs, right? Even just going through the amount of stuff he was asked for that he said no to, and nobody really noticed, and they all came out saying he did quite well. So he was asked to scrap Ofwat, to meet with trans families, to create a bipartisan social care commission, and to meet with nuclear test veterans and give them lots of money. And he very nicely said no to all of those requests, and nobody noticed because it was his first one. He had 400 people behind him. The interaction between them swapping places in the chamber and how they would deal with each other was the big story. It was always going to be the main headline that came out of this. And actually, I'm quite proud of the United Kingdom because what we saw, we take for granted when they swap sides.
Definitely.
You do not get that in other countries with this sort of humility and sincerity that went on. And that kind of peaceful transition of power is something we utterly take for granted and is one of the things that defines us. And I'm very pleased at the civility that we saw on Wednesday.
And Keir Starmer didn't gloat, and Rishi Sunak didn't snipe, and everybody predicted he'd go off to California and throw in the towel, and he didn't. And I think Ruth's absolutely right. It was a really important, peaceful transition of power.
You know, the past few years, it's often quite a lot of knockabout and you think there's loads of heat and no light. But when we had Rylan on and he talked to me about how he actually watched Prime Minister's questions every single week. And I thought, you know, I often think it's for kind of political nerds or people involved in Westminster that watches it. But actually, it is a moment every week where a Prime Minister just has to go and face whatever is thrown at him, answer questions that he doesn't know where they're coming from, and for a leader of the opposition to kind of get an audience and try and get some attention. So it is a really valuable part, isn't it, of what we do as a democracy. And I don't think, as you were both saying, there's many other legislatures or governments in democracies that have this kind of accessibility to a leader in the way that we do with that knockabout every week at PMQs.
And it's watched all around the world. I mean, that's what's so extraordinary. And no other parliament actually has that spontaneity. All of the others is much more controlled, which is why they're not watched all around the world. So it's like the pressure is enormous. Not only are you going to be speaking to your own people and the opposition in the House of Commons, but people in the country are watching it and people all around the world. So it is so pressurised, and it's right that they take it seriously.
And Ruth, how did you prepare when you were doing this with Alex Salmond?
I did it for like maybe 2-3 years with him, and then I did another 4 or 5 with Nicola Sturgeon. So both pretty robust debaters, to be fair. And I had a really tough time at the beginning because at that time, for whatever you think of him, Alex Salmond had been an MP for kind of 20 years. He'd been an MSP for years. He'd been the First Minister for a long time. So he's a big old bruiser and is a good orator. He just is. I was also coming from the third party, so I was doing the kind of the Lib Dem job in Parliament and only had like 15 people sitting behind me. So it wasn't as if we had like lots of people bashing their desks to try and give me encouragement. And it was a little bit David and Goliath. And there was a couple of weeks in a row where I got, like, if it had been a boxing match, the referee would have, like, called time and thrown in the white towel and everything and stopped it. And we ended up having to do a kind of safety first, which is why I completely recognise what Rishi did this week was a total safety first question. And the way in which a questioner asks a question is so important as to how the answerer answers it. So your tone, all of that sort of stuff. And remember that you're not doing it to get an answer in the chamber. You're doing it for the people that are going to watch on television at home or are going to see the social media clips, more importantly. So you're talking over the head of the way in which it's structured, because it's such a false construct, the way that these things are set up, and you're trying to make a point that can be clipped up and sent to your people, but it's how you do that and how you get the sketch writers to say that you had the upper hand and all that sort of stuff, and it's really difficult.
But I think bluntly as well, until the Conservatives have a new leader, which is they're going to select that person on November the 2nd, we're going to have 4 candidates going into Conservative Party conference where they'll have a beauty parade. But until we get that person, this is going to be a kind of caretaker sessions, isn't it? Until we really see who's going to match up. That's fair, Harriet, isn't it?
Yeah, but somebody suggested that for the Tories in Prime Minister's questions, bearing in mind there, as you say, Beth, in this election period for their new leader, that actually Rishi Sunak doesn't need to do it each time, that each one of those candidates could have a turn of putting those 6 questions to see what it looks like.
That would be quite good. Ruth, what do you think? Do you like that idea?
Yeah, I do. And one of the reasons I like it is because it gives us a different thread to talk about. Because actually the danger time for the Conservatives is right now. Keir Starmer will never have a bigger microphone than he's got right now. And you can already see from his performance on Wednesday, he's trying to establish things. So he's not just talking about this government, he's talking about this government of service. Like, he's already laying down what it is that you repeat and repeat and repeat and that becomes a public consciousness. We didn't pin on Labour that Gordon Brown had sold the gold, that there was no money left, that they'd failed to fix the roof when the sun was shining during the election campaign. We did that after. We did that after we'd won and we had a bigger microphone and they were all at sea and they were picking their next leader. So this is the danger period for the Tories about what's going to be pinned on us. So actually, if we can make PMQs have other newslines coming out of it, it will actively aid the Tory party.
I just want to talk quickly about the 2-child benefit cap, because Keir Starmer made it very clear in the general election. I asked him in our leaders' debate repeatedly, would he lift the cap? He's been clear all along. He will only do it when the public finances allow. It's important because next week Rachel Reeves is talking about this spending inheritance, and she's going to make an announcement, which I'll come to. But there was a rebellion on Wednesday night when a group of Labour MPs on the left of the party rebelled against the new government, voted to scrap the cap. There were 7 of them, including John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor, Rebecca Long-Bailey, the former leadership contender, close ally of Corbyn, Richard Bergen, and a few others, 7 of them in total. So they voted against the government, whose majority is not in threat any which way. They've had the whip suspended for 6 months. Now, in parliamentary terms, there is no harsher way to deal with a rebel than just withdrawing the whip. Keir Starmer just went from 0 to 100. He did the most stringent thing he could do. I asked one of his team about it. I said, bit harsh, bit much. And this is what I got back. We expect Labour MPs to support the programme we were elected on. They are not messing, are they, Harriet? What did you think of that?
I think people want to see a government that actually delivers on its promises and doesn't get in and suddenly say, oh, well, you know, all those things I said just before the election, actually, I've changed my mind. And they also want to see a stable team of people working together. And the other thing about this is, if you stand for Parliament as a Labour candidate, there's a kind of agreement. I mean, nobody forces you to stand for Parliament as a Labour candidate. You can stand as an independent. But if you stand as a Labour candidate, you sign up to the manifesto, you sign up to agree to vote with the whip so that you vote collectively. And I think, in the first lot of votes in, to vote against the party as an individual, you've broken your promise from the manifesto. So I don't think it was harsh. I think it was just clarity.
I just think that we've had this chat before about whether Starmer is lucky or good, and how he continues to be lucky. And if you were going to write down one of the coolest things that could happen to you as a new leader of a government with a stonking majority and a bunch of crusty lefties that are a bit of an irritant, it's have them rebel on something that allows you to take them outside and give them the toughest possible sanction, suspend them for 6 months so they're not your problem, they're on notice, they've got to vote with you every which way or they're not getting back in. So just show them that you're serious. I mean, like that poor genie in the lamp that has been giving wish after wish after wish to Keir Starmer through the election campaign. Like, give the lad a break, like give him a holiday, because, I mean, it could not have been a better sort of outcome for him.
And to be honest, Harriet, Starmer is consistent about his messaging into the party, what he expects. He is ruthless. I mean, I asked him in an interview before the election, are you ruthless? And he said, yes, I'm ruthless, not for myself, but for a Labour government. He is quite ruthless, not in a vicious way, but just in a really he's like a laser target, yeah? And I think that probably within the leadership, they are sending a signal, are they not, to the left, which is we are going to control what we're going to do and we will not tolerate dissent. So get with the programme. How long it holds and how convincing that will be over months and months and months, I think is another question. But that's the messaging, right?
Yes, and I think it's protective of those other Labour MPs who actually hate child poverty every bit as much as those 7 and yearn to do something about it, but know that it has to be done in a way that can be funded. So I think it's very decisive, and I completely agree with him, and I find myself despairing of those 7 who were just elected. Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the 2-child benefit policy immediately, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along, and that won't be in that they don't do something about it quite soon, and that won't be because of the 7, it will be because they care about it.
Okay, so number one, you think McDonald et al. Are out of order?
Totally out of order.
You think they should just pipe down?
Well, or
Okay.
then nobody forces them to stand for election as a Labour MP. If they want to be independents, then be independents. But if you sign up to a party, then stick with your word. They're not the victims here. They've broken their promises.
Okay, so you think they're out of order, but you also think that Starmer will move on this quite quickly?
Because he'll want to, because he cares about child poverty, as do people in the rest of the cabinet. They know about poverty from personal experience, and it's part of their ideological commitment. But they've got to do it in a way which doesn't stuff the finances. Liz Truss is quite a recent memory.
Because Ruth, let me come to you on this, because Rachel Reeves is going to do this big speech about spending inheritance, in which the lid is lifted on the bonnet of the previous government and the state of the public finances, and it's going to be like a car crash. That's a terrible analogy, but you get the point, which is, they're going to say prisons, public sector pay, immigration, they've got the blood scandal, the post office compensation schemes. They have got so much stacked up that needs to be dealt with. I've been told that we're going to see an angry Rachel Reeves, that there's going to be a lot of indignation. I've been told that those within her department were genuinely shocked that the state of the public finances were worse. You can see how they are spinning this as well, Ruth, which is make it really bad and pin it all onto the last government, so that when you have your difficult first budget, it's kind of not your fault. It is the fault of the previous government. I mean, Ruth, whichever way, Rachel Reeves is stuffed, right? If she's got these bills mounting up, they've boxed themselves in on taxes. She's got fiscal rules vis-a-vis borrowing. That this is going to be quite difficult, isn't it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We're going to expect to see Rachel Reeves with a face like a bulldog chewing a wasp, telling everybody, now that she's had a chance to lift the lid or open the cupboard door, or whatever the analogy is, it's worse than she ever thought. So all of these things that we didn't know about, which incidentally we did know about, we did know that there was going to be blood compensation. We did know that there was public sector pay recommendations that have to be paid when there's a public sector pay uplift. But all of that will get lost. This is going to be one of the things that get hung around our neck, in the same way as we hung things around their neck. She's going to go super scold mode. But then what does she do? Because when the shoe was on the other foot and the Tories inherited a mess post the bank failures and all the rest of it, we made the narrative about what Labour did wrong and it didn't fix the roof when the sun was shining and all that sort of stuff. There was also, and here is the counter plan. Now, whether you liked austerity or not, George Osborne was super clear about what he was going to do and what the different strands of that was going to be. So it was going to be, it was not fair to dump our debts on our children and our grandchildren. It was not fair that somebody going out to work brings home less money than somebody that's in benefits. So there was a whole sort of narrative that was built up about what he was doing and why he was doing it. Again, you can disagree with it if you like, but he had that. I don't know where she goes because she's closed off so many areas of tax and spend. She's saying that she's not going to bend the fiscal rules. She's going to stick to them absolutely. And she's also saying that she's not going to raise borrowing as part of those fiscal rules. So there's only about 3 or 4 areas of taxes that she can change. She also said that she's not going to sort of change the length of time it takes in order to pay back some of the deficit and the debt. So I'm really interested to see that and then what. I mean, I fully expect, I can probably write half the script of what the scold is going to be, but I don't know what the remedy is from her. And we didn't see it in the campaign, and that's going to be interesting.
I mean, Harriet, number one, in terms of public sector pay, I mean, the Chancellor was on the beeb with Laura Kuenssberg at the weekend. She heavily hinted that she would honour those pay deals. And you've got a Labour government that needs hospitals, schools, public services to work better. I mean, this is the whole shtick in a way of the election, wasn't it? To fix public services.
Yeah, well, she did hint at that, and because what she said was there's a cost if you don't settle, because the cost is strikes, and the cost is you can't recruit people you need, so you pay agency staff and that's more expensive, and you can't retain the experienced people you've got, so you have to spend more in training. So she basically did say that it might end up being more expensive. So that's why people felt that she was leaning towards saying that she would accept those public sector pay review body awards. But I think what she's done is, before the election, she's done an analysis. The reason why the public finances are so utterly stuffed, and obviously she's going to explain in gory detail how bad it is, but the reason is because we've had very slow growth. We've had virtually no growth in the economy, and we've had economic instability, which has deterred investment and in turn deterred growth. So that's why her analysis and her plan is that what she's got to do in government is make sure that we get growth going so that revenues can be flowing into the Treasury. But the difficulty is the time scale on that, because the problems are immediate, but the solution will take time. And that's why, although Rachel has got an iron will and a crystal clear analysis, we need that matched by our new backbenchers.
Ruth, you're smiling.
Yeah, I'm smiling just because of iron and crystal clear, and I'm laughing at the phrases that we all use in politics and the way in which we try and explain what super focus is and all this other stuff. But I'm laughing too as well, because everybody, it doesn't matter if you're left, right, centrist, round the back, you want growth in the economy, unless you're the Green Party, who don't believe that growth is and GDP is a measure of happiness, or indeed good for the world. But it's not like people haven't tried for growth. That's what Liz Truss said. It's what Boris Johnson said. It's what Tony Blair said. It's what Gordon Brown said. It's what, John Major, Margaret Thatcher, Edward Heath. Like, everybody wants growth. It's not always in the power of a prime minister to just whip up growth. The Labour government is going to run into areas where their ideology impacts with reality pretty quickly. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they do about that. So one of the ways in which you can have growth is you can import lots of working age people to expand the workforce, to do lots of things. But immigration is such a hot topic, and they've made so many promises on that what are they going to do about that? also growth isn't something that just countries can do by themselves. It's about things like international trading. It's about making sure there's not a war in Europe, or there's not an oil shock, or there's not a pandemic. Like, you don't get to be in control of that. It's not as if there's been a stream of Tory prime ministers that haven't wanted growth and have actively worked against it. And even good growth is maybe only 2%, 3% per year. You're looking at public paid sector deals going up by 5.5%. You're looking at trying to increase the defence budget from 2% to 3% over time.
It is true, isn't it, that she is going to set out a spending review. That's when the government lay out their spending plans for different departments, how they allocate money. Harriet, I take everything you're saying about growth, but Ruth is right in this, that the problem that the Chancellor has is the manoeuvrability around how does she either borrow more money within her fiscal frameworks or tax more in order to try and fix some of these problems in the public finances. Because obviously in the election, they were so clear to rule out taxes on working people, income tax, national insurance, VAT. They are the massive tax raisers. But there were other areas around wealth taxes, council tax, banding reviews, things like this, where the Starmer team were a bit less clear. So, Harriet, do you think there is a possibility that Rachel Reeves might have to do some tax raising in the budget? Or do you think that given the way that they fought the election, that would be very damaging?
Well, she will do some tax raising, for example, on non-DOMs, closing loopholes, on windfall levies on the energy companies, VAT on private schools. There will be a whole slew of tax increases to fund people's priorities straight off, but she will not break her promises. I mean, trust in politics is so important. And the stakes are really high, as you say. I'm sure she is looking at the figures every day in the Treasury, figures on inflation, figures on business confidence, because she is depending on the economy playing its part.
But Harriet, what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves were quite clever at, though, was they did allow themselves some manoeuvrability on some wealth taxes and things around, say, capital gains, etc. Do you think she might have to move on things that she didn't pre-announce, that there might be some tax raising that we did not have in the run-up to the election, but she has to do now?
Well, she was very clear that she was not going to do the budget in advance of the general election. So, of course, there will be measures that have not been talked about, which they'll be considering. But the basic ones about the cost of living crisis and the collapse in consumer confidence, which in turn kicks into undermining the economy, taxes have played their part. Taxes on working people going up have played their part in that, and she doesn't want to make that worse. But I do think, the thing about Rachel is, my goodness me, she combines toughness and serenity in a way which is absolutely, I would be tearing my hair out, but she has not got a hair out of place and looks absolutely serene. And I think that's because she's steely confident. She's been in the Bank of England. She feels she knows what she's talking about more than other people. And, I'm trusting and believing in her.
I'm going to say now, I think she will meet the pay recommendations. But then what does it mean for the rest of the public finances? Because it could run to extra billions of pounds. The second thing is on housing targets. This is about building 300,000 more homes a year, and they are setting mandatory targets. Now, local government can decide how they do it, but central government are saying it will be done. This is going to create quite a stink bomb in lots of parts of the country where, be it green industrial strategy and big building of wind farms, housing targets, etc., local people won't like it. And actually, this is a fight that they are willing to have, as you were saying, Harriet. So there's going to be quite a lot going on next week. And, in the end, they have to do it because Rachel Reeves needs that growth. If you haven't got loads of levers on tax and spend, what can you do? What you can do is reform. But that does take time. I think it is going to be quite a doozy of an autumn, Harry. I know what you're saying about she's a cool cucumber, Rachel Reeves. I never see a hair out of place on her bob. Even as mine frizzes up, hers is always sleek.
It's a metaphor.
She's a precise lady.
Ken Clarke never got this sort of analysis of his Barnett when he was Chancellor.
Well, I like to do Barnett's and big stuff as well, Ruth. Very important to me. But she's going to have a bloody tough budget, isn't she, Harriet?
She is. And on the Labour benches, there are a lot of newly elected Labour MPs from what were previously true blue Conservative areas of beautiful countryside who don't want building on the green belt, but the manifesto was absolutely clear. And I kind of think that in the short term, it's torture and agony. But in the medium term, there will be families moving into this new housing and they will then become part of the community. So the story about these things is always it's like terrible and nobody wants any change and it's all very difficult. But once it happens, if it's done right, and that's why it's important local authorities are involved in how it's done, it can solve a problem. And the idea that you've got all these people aged 35 living with their parents because there's not enough housing and therefore the price shoots up and therefore they can't afford it. It's a problem that's got to be solved. And, I wish them well with it. It's going to be tough in the short term, but we'll get there in the longer term.
We'll be back after the break to talk about Kamala Harris taking on Donald Trump. And we're back. Let's talk about the US election because things really have turned a corner since we last spoke. President Biden has dropped out of the race against Donald Trump and endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. Biden came out in support of her. The Clintons came out. Barack Obama was a little bit more circumspect. Anyway, within 48 hours, it was a done deal. Now, we have loads to get into, but I wanted to kick off with this voice note we had, and this is from Sheila.
I want to ask a question about Kamala Harris. When you listen to people discussing her record, men in general tend to slam her for her performance in general, and in particular for her performance in the debates. Women often start off by saying, well, yes, I agree with all of that, but... And I'm wondering if what we're starting to see is a gender dynamic emerging in the election, and I'd be very interested in your thoughts.
A gender dynamic in this election. Well, the dynamics clearly changed. Almost immediately after Biden endorsed Harris as a candidate, we saw the right launching personal attacks on her. We saw a lot of this when Hillary Clinton stood against Trump in 2016 too. Harriet, I'll come to you first. What have you made of the attacks on Kamala Harris because she doesn't have biological children, which has become like a talking point? What do you make of that?
It shows that they've got some things going on in American politics which are inconceivable to us here, which focus on women as reproductive vehicles, if you like. There's this thing called the pronatal movement, which glorifies women according to how many children that they've had, so that you've got women having 12, 13, 14 children, and that a woman's worth is how many children she's had. And J.D. Vance, who's Donald Trump's pick for vice president, specifically attacked Kamala Harris because she had not got her own children. And this is reaching to this pronatalist movement, kind of right-wing Republican, evangelical Christian, it's sometimes identified with as well, movement in the States, which is really, to us, it's quite shocking. I mean, when Theresa May was running for the leader of the Tory party and Andrea Leadsom was also running for leader of the Tory party, Andrea Leadsom passed a comment about Theresa May not herself having children. And Andrea Leadsom had to drop out of the race because of that, because it was regarded as so unacceptable to criticise a woman because she hasn't had children. And, women get it both ways. Either they haven't had children, so they're unnatural, or they've got too many children, so they're a write-off. But I think the other thing about American politics is that, we've seen Hillary Clinton, she's a big figure, Michelle Obama, Nancy Pelosi, but that masks the fact that there is still very much older male-dominated politics, not just Trump and Biden in the States, but if you look at the House of Representatives, if you look at the Senate, women are massively outnumbered by older men. They are way behind us on that. So there's still the question, could a woman be a president of the United States? Nobody asked that here. We did that with Thatcher way, way ago. So I think it's quite odd because we think of America as modern, but in this respect, they are really Soviet style.
Ruth?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there from what Harriet said, particularly the stuff about Andrea Leadsom, because there was a real solidarity across women, whether you had children, which I didn't at the time, or whether you didn't, that was like, that's unfair. She also got into a lot of trouble because she challenged it and said that she didn't see it, and then there was a recording because, journalists take recordings before they write things in newspapers. But I do think what's interesting is that I'm a little bit guilty of what Harriet's just said, in that I just assumed that there would be a tussle because they would need a heavyweight like Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, or somebody else to be the Democratic nominee to take on Trump because he's such a big figure. The thing that kind of gets me is she had 4 years to build herself up if, for whatever reason, a man in his 80s wasn't going to be fit to run and be on the Democratic ticket the next time around. And they gave her nothing to do. Like, her vice presidentship has been like an empty crisp packet. She's had nothing of substance that she's been given to do by Biden. And now we're struggling around, going to have to TikTok her way to momentum to try and get her in a fight with Donald Trump, who does not bring a knife to a gunfight, because she's not got her own record. She's bound by Biden's record. So she's going to have to build bricks without straw. And it's a bit of a disgrace, to be honest with you.
It's so interesting, Ruth, that you talk about that, because I call this the fire blanket approach, right? You're Biden, you want a second term. And basically what I mean is you just kill off anything, any flame, any rise in flame, anything that's, attracting attention around you in order that you are the one and only. There's a lot of criticism about Kamala Harris. Well, she was ineffective as VP and she didn't do anything. But as Ruth says, it's partly at the behest of how much those around you want to build you up. And now they've got this rearguard action of trying to sort of like, as you said, Ruth, TikTok her way to the presidency. I mean, I have seen the video of her dancing along with the kids. And can I just say, again, I've talked about Rachel's bob, forgive me. She's got really good dance moves. The point I'm trying to make about it, it's quite attractive, right?
She's lighthearted, she's human, she's got empathy, she'll give people a hug, she will laugh at something that's funny. I think the problem isn't that people don't think of her as human enough for the job. I think people think of her as too lightweight for the job. So what's she got that can demonstrate ballast to show people that she's got the guts for it?
And what a contrast this was with Obama, who allowed Joe Biden to shine. There was another way to do the vice presidency. And I was like, where is Kamala? And it did not reflect well on him that he shut her up. And now we see her and she's great. I mean, I'm nearly wearing a T-shirt, I heart Kamala, really.
Well, I've got my cute dogs T-shirt. You can have your... No, but actually, Harry, it's true as well, isn't it? Because do you remember that whole thing in the second term of Obama where it was all about how much Joe and Barrett loved each other? I can't even think of times when I've seen her photographed with him. But look, the thing about all of it is as well, though, is in the end, he had to concede. That he could not run again. The weight of opposition was growing, and actually there was a serious thing. The money flow was drying up. And now there's this massive energy around this campaign. I read something the other day, like they've already signed up another 100,000 volunteers. And actual polling shows from Reuters Ipsos, completed on Tuesday, showed that Harris has a 2 percentage point lead over Trump, 44% to 42%. Let's see what happens in those swing states. But this race is now alive. And I guess there's, number one, it's completely unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen. It's not like the kind of Labour win, which we kind of knew would happen. I don't know what's going to happen. But also the idea that the US could elect a woman to be president, and not just that, a woman from an ethnic minority. I mean, that is history making, right?
It certainly is. But it's sort of what's happened with Biden dropping out is it's turned all the arguments in the election upside down. So now the Democrats are the new generation and Trump is the old guy. And it was the other way around. And I think that Joe Biden did do a very good, magnanimous giving up speech where he said, now is the time to hand the torch to the younger generation. Boom. And then you've got Taylor Swift and Beyonce coming in behind Kamala Harris. I mean, it's like firecrackers going off and the dividing lines are being drawn.
Yeah, I think the timing might just be a little bit off for her because she's got this huge wave of momentum. I mean, honestly, it was like... You know when you see on film there's a house that's on fire or something and it looks as if it's dampening down, then you open a door and the oxygen comes in and the whole thing goes off. It's called a backdraft and it's like an explosion that occurs. I mean, that's what we've had in this race. There was no reason, even if you were a registered Democrat for your entire life, there was literally no reason to go out and vote for the guy. And the oxygen that has just come in to the Democratic Party and the campaign, that they've got someone young and vibrant and, you know, that can stand up and say words without tripping over themselves. It's a low bar, but like they've suddenly got so much energy from it. So the energy is amazing. But, and here's the big but, you know, she's not had a test yet. Like, she is going to have to go into the arena. She is going to have to face the criticism. There are people that are prejudiced against women being president, against ethnic minorities being president. The fact that she's married to a Jewish man, the fact that she doesn't have children, like the pressure that's going to come on her, even though she's been the vice president, is nothing. 105 days is not enough to survive on that first bit of momentum, nor is it enough time to build the grassroots campaign that she needs to get her over the line.
I've been obsessively listening to US podcasts, and there is a kind of optimism now within those on the Democrat side that their view is Trump is infinitely beatable, that it was an invidious choice for the American people, that they didn't much like either men and they didn't like the age. And as Harriet was saying, the whole argument that Trump could put Biden too old and too frail, that has gone. Now what he can try and do is pin the record of immigration, economy on Kamala.
If I was in Trump's campaign, I would pummel Kamala Harris because she lied to the American people. She stood there and said that Joe Biden was fit and he was fit to run again. And she said that right up until the minute that he resigned. That's what I would pin on her, and I would hammer that.
Before we go, I want to get to this message from Alice, who says, I have a burning unanswered question from the election. How did cordless straighteners work out for you? I can tell you, Alice, that my hair straighteners were an absolute resounding success. I think if you saw any video of me, the bob was perfection. They were used and recharged a lot. They were also borrowed by various people, as well as becoming a mix of admiration and envy from the entire lobby as women looked at my perfect bob and my hair straighteners. And also other women journalists also began to reveal their other cordless hair devices that they were also carrying around. Honestly.
There's a kind of serious and puzzling point underneath this, which is that if you're a man and your hair is tousled, it means you're characterful and interesting. But if you're a woman and your hair is all over the place, people just think you're mad.
It's disgusting double standards. I'm with you.
I think Beth is actually genetically blessed with her fringe. I think that, you know, that she's got an unfair advantage on us.
Honestly, this fringe has been causing me some difficulties lately, Harriet. It needs seeing to. But anyway.
I think you need to do that genealogy programme, Who Do You Think You Are? I think you should go on there. I reckon if they go back far enough, you're going to be like related to Cleopatra or something.
All those people, you know, in those stone friezes, and they'll get to one of the stone friezes where there's somebody with a big fringe and it'll be your relative.
And a lipstick.
I love the idea that I am related to Cleopatra, but I think the reality would be I would be a peasant from Ireland, which I'm happy with. You know, where do you think these green eyes and brown hair come from? But Alice, I can recommend portable hair straighteners. They saved the bob, which had to go to many parts of the country and handle many different types of weather. But Harriet, I completely agree with you. And one of my frustrations about my job is that if you do not look smart and well presented on telly, you just have to look really presentable as a woman. And if you don't, no one can get past what you look like to what you're saying. And it's bloody annoying, but that's where we are.
I mean, eccentricity and sort of looking unusual in a man is fine. You know, you can look lots of different ways as a man. With a woman, you've got to look groomed or people think you haven't got your shit together.
Harriet, may I say that you always look exquisite.
Well, I'm hot-footing it down to the shop to get the cordless ones.
I love my cordless hair straighteners. Now, Alice, thank you for that very important question. I'm glad that someone asked her. I've been dying to talk about them. Now, remember, you can email anytime at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk or send a voice note to the burner phone 07934 200 444. And during parliamentary recess, we will be going through them all and answering loads of questions. So send them in because we want to talk about what you want to talk about. And we have one thing to quickly plug. It's our tour. We're going on tour. Girls on tour. What goes on tour stays on tour, etc., etc. A reminder that we're coming to London, Salford, Liverpool, Glasgow in September. It's me and Ruth and some very special guests. Links to the tickets are in the show notes. They are selling fast, so go, 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 go. And can I just say, for all of you that have bought tickets, thank you, because it's made us feel very loved. That's it. So what are we all doing this weekend?
I am manning the bar down the tennis club, bizarrely. So I'll be pulling pints and making pims for people. Just randomly, because there's a big competition on.
Oh, I love it. Harriet, what are you going to do this weekend?
I'm going off with my daughter and 3 of my grandchildren, and we're hoping that it's not going to rain in the English countryside.
Oh, I hope the sun stays for you. And I'm just going to be lying down and reading books. I'm reading Demon Copperhead at the moment. It's very good, by Barbara Kingsolver. Very good. Very good indeed. I'm thoroughly enjoying that. Haven't read a book for a while, so it's been a real pleasure. And thanks for joining us, Harriet. It was such a joy. So thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.